On this morning, Clarice met Ed and had a little chat with him. The purpose was to prevent Ed from crossing paths with Verdio who could read minds. After that, she then went to the tricks hall and waited for the arrival of the Holy Emperor, but, while she was waiting, an unexpected disaster suddenly appeared that befell the entire academy, a very powerful shock that shook the building she was in. It was the awakened scene of a majestic creature, the Saint Dragon, Velbrock. Clarice's eyes widened in fear when she saw the scene. The aura Velbrock carried was so terrifying that it even made Clarice think that she was going to die. After that, along with Velbrock's awakened and the destruction it brought, various scenes of the death of those closest to her then occurred. They died in order to protect her. Seeing the blood on her wrist, Clarice realized that she wasn't just hallucinating, it might actually be happening. Her hands trembled with fear at the thought. Clarice thought, if this keeps up, I'm going to die. Seeing Clarice's sudden silence, while buttoning up his shirt again, Ed then confusedly called out to her. Ignoring it, Clarice then held his hand, and immediately took him away from there. She said that they had to run immediately. The people around were then shocked at her actions. Ed was the same. Ed was really confused at this time. He couldn't refuse the Saintess, so he could only confusedly wonder about what really happened. But, when Clarice forcibly put him into the carriage, Ed then confusedly called her and asked her to wait for a while. He asked her wasn't she going to go to the tricks hall to welcome the Holy Emperor, but, Clarice certainly would not care about the appointment because she knew what crisis would befall the academy soon. After sitting in the carriage, Clarice then immediately told the coachman that she would take full responsibility and ordered him to immediately escape to the Mex's bridge as soon as possible, as fast as they could. After that, at full speed, the carriage then immediately left the place, leaving the stunned students behind. The incident really left confusion in the minds of the students there. They were really confused by what they had just witnessed. They couldn't believe that the Sinus had kidnapped Ed Roth Taylor. Janica was no less confused than them. The incident was so sudden that it made her unable to react. But her focus was somewhat different from the students there. A bit of madness appeared in her eyes when she recalled Clarice saying something like taking responsibility and running away. Meanwhile, in the luxurious carriage that was speeding up, seeing Clarice who kept crying in front of her, Ed confusedly asked her how long she would cry like this. They didn't have time for this. Hearing that, Clarice then told him about what really happened. There would be a big dragon descending on the island of Arkan, and we would all be killed by it. Ed could only be confused and surprised to hear that. With tears in her eyes, Clarice continued, I almost died once, but I went back in time. Clarice also said that he was the one who saved her, and it seems, his past self realized something, but before he could tell her something, he was trapped under the ruins, and died to protect her. Clarice cried when she recalled the incident. While holding Ed's hand with both hands, Clarice then said to him, I know this seems absurd to you, but before he died, Senior said this to me, if you find it difficult, ask for my help, ask for help from me, and make sure you tell him this. Ed sighed hearing that. He didn't really mind Clarice's sudden action, he just felt that this was too sudden. Ed said that he didn't know what to answer, and when Ed looked outside, a busy street scene then appeared in his view with various carriages passing by. At that very moment, the coachman said to Clarice that they had reached the Mex's bridge checkpoint. They would hold position from now on. Hearing that, with some hesitation, Ed then told Clarice that going there would be a waste. He suggested her to change the route for now and go to see the Holy Emperor, but, as if ignoring his words, Clarice suddenly said something confusing at this time. 15155001660. The numbers that looked like codes were the last things Ed said to her before his death, and sure enough, Ed's eyes widened in surprise when he heard the codes. Ed seemed to be fully aware of the current situation. Meanwhile, looking at the various carriages that stopped in front of him, the coachman said that they seemed to be completely blocked. He then immediately said to Clarice that it seemed that the delivery of goods from the Elt store had been delayed because of the Holy King's formal procession, and judging from the timing. But, before the coachman could even finish his sentence, someone suddenly shouted from inside the carriage telling him to break through immediately. It was Ed. With a face of urgency, Ed said that this was an emergency. No matter what, he asked him to break through as soon as possible, but, the coachman was a bit hesitant at the moment, because if they did such a despicable thing, bad rumors regarding the Saintess would definitely spread in the academy. But, Ed knew that such things were not important for now. He quickly told the coachman that the Saintess was in danger. Rather, they were all in danger, as long as it wasn't impossible. He asked him to break through immediately. Anyway, Ed assured him not to worry about anything. His words and expression seemed to have convinced the coachman. He told him to hold on tightly and immediately whipped the horse to walk again. Ed's words just now made him feel a bit unhappy. He felt a bit underestimated, this way, and that he had been driving a carriage for 22 years, if he could exaggerate a bit. He might have been able to cross the ocean while closing his eyes. The coachman really didn't boast. He was able to break through the streets filled with carriages, but his actions certainly made the carriage drivers he passed surprised and panicked. Not only that, Ed and Clarice, who were in the carriage, could not sit stably at this time due to the shocks produced. The two of them even fell down, which made their position a little ambiguous at the moment, but Ed's mind was not there at all. He was thinking about the numbers that looked like the code Clarice said earlier. If translated, it would be like this: soon, the Saint Dragon will be awakened and we will all die. Although what Clarice said really didn't make sense to him, but Ed decided to believe her, because of the series of numbers she said. In this world there was no one who knew the number other than him, 1550060. It was a series of numbers that Ed remembered clearly before transmigrating to this world. It was his military ID number. After that, Clarice then told the whole story from the awakened of Velbrock to the moment she went back in time. Hearing that Ophelis Hall was also destroyed, Ed realized that it meant that there was no safe place on the Arkan Island. He now understood why Clarice chose to run away, and if she did turn back time, Ed suspected that this must have something to do with celestial magic. Of all the famous magic theories that existed, only celestial magic could affect time. But, while Ed was expressing his conjecture regarding her phenomenon, he then noticed that Clarice's body was sweating profusely. He asked if she was listening to what he was saying. Clarice stammeringly replied yes. She understood that he suspected this was due to celestial magic. Ed confirmed it, but his face suddenly showed a bit of confusion at this moment, because he knew that turning back time on such a large scale was an impossible thing to do with the mana of a human. If what she said was true, then soon, but before Ed could even finish his words, a very violent shock suddenly hit the place where they were. This was the moment when Velbrock had just been awakened, and the first dragon scales attack that Velbrock threw out. It was really a very powerful creature. Just from its appearance it had brought such devastating destruction. Clarice screamed in fear while protecting herself, sensing that the carriage she was riding in had been destroyed. Clarice realized that the disaster was repeating itself. She initially thought that once she managed to escape and get out of the Arkan Island, they would probably be safe for now, but when she opened her eyes and saw the tragic scene in front of her, she then realized that her thinking was too naive. That nightmare, everything was repeating itself. When Clarice was frightened and confused there, she then heard someone calling her from behind her and asking if she was okay. Clarice felt very happy when she heard that familiar voice, but when Clarice finally looked back and saw the person's condition, her body then froze. Due to the shock brought by what she witnessed, it was the scene of Ed, who was sitting there limply with his body covered in blood with several dragon scales stuck on his body. Clarice screamed in worry when she saw his condition. She then immediately went over to him and tried to heal him, but Ed himself knew that it was useless, so he only gave her a few words of advice. He said that she should not give up and keep moving forward. Hearing Ed's weak tone and his worsening condition, Clarice immediately felt panic. She frantically assured him that he would be fine, she would do something, but her struggle then turned into despair. With tears on her face, Clarice apologized to him. She apologized for not being able to help. She felt that she was really a useless person. She could not do anything, always being the one to be rescued, and constantly getting people around her killed, never doing anything to return the favor, and always relying on others. Clarice guiltily apologized. Hearing her helplessness, while holding her face with his blood-stained hands, Ed said that she didn't need to apologize. He also begged her not to cry. He promised to help her again. He would definitely help her, so he asked her to stop crying and not give up. Don't fall into the abyss of despair. After saying that, Ed suddenly fell silent for a long time. Seeing that, Clarice then confusedly called him, but there was no response from Ed. Clarice then frantically tried to call him again and again, but the response she got was still the same. Clarice's body trembled with fear when she saw that. She realized that Ed had died. He died right in front of her for the second time. Clarice then blamed herself. She wished that if only this kind of blessing was given to Ed instead of someone like her, and if only she could have returned one more time. Clarice cried again when she thought about it. She really felt hopeless at the moment. She silently wished that she could return one more time. In the midst of her despair, a celestial magic circle reappeared at the moment. It was hovering over the academy. bearing witness to the disaster currently engulfing the academy, and as the fluctuations of the celestial magic circle continued to strengthen and reached its peak, Clarice was then stunned when she saw the familiar scene in front of her. Clarice was completely confused and clueless at the moment. While Ed himself was confused when he saw her suddenly silent, she had said that she wanted to talk to him, so, he then asked her what was the need. Ignoring his question, Clarice's eyes then moistened when she saw Ed, who was still healthy and fine at the moment. She couldn't hold back her tears anymore, and immediately rushed to hug him. Ed and Janica were then shocked by her sudden action. Ignoring their reactions, Clarice was determined, whatever happened, she would definitely save him. After that, Clarice then dragged Ed back into the carriage. Ed was certainly confused and shocked by her actions, but Clarice did not explain further to him. She planned to take a different route this time. After the two of them finally got into the carriage, Clarice then immediately ordered the coachman to head eastward. After that, the carriage then walked lonely under the blood-red sky that was currently enveloping the academy. While fleeing with the horse carriage, Clarice then returned to tell Ed everything and convinced him to hide. But, even though they had chosen another route, the fate they received was still the same. With the resurrection of Velbrock and the first dragon scales that it threw, the carriage then disintegrated and killed everyone on board, except for Clarice, although she had gone back in time for the third time, and escaped to the other side of the island. But, the ending she got was still the same as Ed, who died in front of her with several dragon scales stuck on his body. Even though they had rushed to escape, they were still too late. But, while Clarice was lamenting Ed's death, the celestial magic circle hovering over the academy fluctuated, and when it reached its peak, Clarice was once again transported back in time. This is the fourth time she has gone back in time. The storyline is roughly the same, with Clarice dragging Ed into the carriage. While in the carriage, Clarice immediately tells Ed everything, which makes Ed immediately understand the situation. Ed then suggests her to go to a coastal cave on the west coast, but the cave collapses. As a result of the shock generated by the awakening of Velbrock, the collapsing rocks then fall on Ed and kill him immediately there. But, when Clarice realized that she went back in time one more time, she did not give up and continued to fight. On her 12th time she went back in time, with Clarice still dragging Ed into the carriage. They then went to Professor Glass's secret laboratory, but the ending was still the same, with Ed dying in front of her. The story after that was Clarice, who repeatedly went back in time along with the failures that befell her, but after who knows how many times, the ending she got was still the same, with Ed repeatedly dying in front of her with different deaths. Repeatedly facing failure and watching the person she respected die many times in front of her really made Clarice feel tired. She even felt that her world was already full of a pool of blood at the moment, with Ed's dead bodies around her. But, after who knows how many times she returned to the past, Clarice had already lost her resolve at the moment. The color of despair even shone on her face at the moment. Seeing Clarice, who was suddenly silent in front of him without explaining anything to him, Ed then could only confusedly call out to her. Clarice never knew what the reason was that caused time to go backwards. She had searched all over the academy, but neither the Holy Emperor nor the Archbishop were found anywhere, and, with tears rolling down her cheeks, Clarice sadly thought, no matter how many times I ran away, I could never save him. It really made Clarice feel sad and guilty towards him, while Ed himself could only feel confused when he saw Clarice, who suddenly cried in front of him. On this day that had repeated dozens of times, Ed always saved her and died in her place, and when Ed confusedly called her once again, Clarice then mentioned the numbers that were his military ID to Ed. Clarice was really confused about what else she should do now. She was really out of her mind at this time, and when the carriage they were traveling in finally arrived at the Mex's bridge checkpoint, the coachman then said that they would hold position from now on. I don't know how many times Clarice heard those words. Looking at the crowded street scene that was there, Clarice's face did not show her enthusiasm at all like the first time. Her eyes looked very tired at this time. She could already guess what would happen next. Soon, Ed would definitely shout through the window and ask the coachman to break in, but, different from what she expected, Ed calmly asked the coachman to stop the carriage here for now. Clarice was confused and could not react for a moment when she heard that, and when the carriage finally stopped and Ed walked down to the street, he then invited Clarice to get off too. Clarice could only feel confused by that, but she did not immediately ask and followed him down to the street. Ed said that he did not know how many times she had faced this ordeal, but, while covering Clarice's body with his coat, Ed said that she needed to rest. Clarice's tears broke out when she heard that. Stopping the carriage in such a tense situation didn't make sense, but, instead of feeling unhappy at this time, she even felt happy, because this was different from Ed's previous actions. This was the first time he had made such a decision. While rolling up his sleeves, Ed said that he knew some people who might be able to help. Hearing that, Clarice then realized that something had changed. This brought back a hope in her heart.